Nomad Podcast.
What if there were a systematic way to unearth what your true purpose in life is, your why? If you believe that we each have a unique gift to contribute to the world, and that there is a highest and best use of our natural talents and these life experiences that we spend a lifetime developing that are exclusively ours, then what more important endeavor can you imagine than to work to discover what it is you were born to do? Now, if you've ever wrestled with this question, then you're in for a treat today, because we're talking with Matt Dunsmoor of Start With Why. Start With Why is the brainchild of Simon Sinek. It's a process that gives you a formulaic way to uncover your true essence and to be able to start to make decisions that are more congruent with your why. I've noticed that many times people who are drawn to nomadic travel tend to also be in this seeking mindset, open to possibilities, often at a crossroads in their life, looking for the next thing. If you're in this boat yourself, I think you're going to get a lot of value from today's conversation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Matt Dunsmoor. Nomad Podcast is supported in part by Nomad Prep, an online academy that teaches you everything you need to know to take your job on the road and crush it abroad. Enroll today at nomadprep.com/podcast and get your first 4 days of training completely free. Nomad Prep, take your job on the road and take on the world. All right. Welcome, Matt, to the Nomad Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Cool. Okay, let me paint the picture here and kind of just set up the context for why we're having this call. So you are currently traveling with Remote Year Denali. You're in your first month, and you guys are in Lisbon, which is where we met earlier this month when I was there. And you are a facilitator for Start With Why, Simon Sinek's program.
Yep,
and
correct.
The reason I'm so excited about this, and I'll just kind of give the background. So I've gone through the program, the online course. I've also read the book. I've taken 4 people through it just as their partner, and I've bought it just as a gift for a couple other people, just because I really believe in what you guys are doing and the power of this thing. But I will let you explain, what is Start With Why? How do you describe it to someone who has no idea what this is?
So as a company, like the way I kind of sum up what it is that I do is I help individuals and companies connect more deeply and authentically with purpose. So that's really the most closely tied word you could associate with a why. And so a lot of companies and people know a ton about what they do and how they do it, but they don't spend a lot of time and effort thinking about why and making sure that it's actually authentic to them. You know, a lot of people will talk about who we wish we were, who we want to be someday, but it's just not inspiring because everybody's like, yeah, that's not true. And then we go about our days doing whatever it is we do. So we just help people get real words around that make it practical and useful.
And so this is, I think, actually the crux of what separates this from a lot of the other stuff that I've seen is, like you just said, it's not aspirational. It's not like, I wish I was this. Why is like what you actually are. It's like your essence, basically. So Correct. It's more of like almost like an excavation process of determining what is already there, right?
Yeah, so the workshops that we do, we call them why discoveries, very specifically because we look back over the data set of your life and your experience in basically in this form of stories, and use that to inform, okay, what is it that actually matters to you? What's at your very best? What's the contribution you make to the lives of others to positively impact them, and put words around that. Rather than, like you said, there's just so much of especially companies that'll do visioning exercises or whatever that might be. And they're like trying to set a goal for the future, but not rooting it necessarily in who they already are.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they're basically trying to layer on, they're trying to like scaffolding, build stuff on top instead of just like literally peel it back and get down to the essence of everyone.
Exactly.
And so what is the mechanism? Like, how can you give a gist of how this actually works? Like what is the process for Start With Why?
Yeah, so I kind of hinted at it just a second ago when I mentioned stories. So both for organizations and for individuals, there's a similar process. However, the big overlap is that it's rooted in stories. And so as human beings, we just naturally relate to each other best through storytelling. It's how we're wired. And what we do is bring other people's perspectives and insights into that journey so that they can see also what's lying under it, right? So in the individual process, you typically, in a best case scenario, have 2 or 3 other perspectives listening in to help bring out, oh, this is what you're saying. This is what's the meaning under here. Why is this thing important to you? And helping you find those words. And in an organization, it's pretty similar. But rather than looking at the content of someone's entire life, we look at, as an organization, what makes us most proud to be here and the specific stories around that, right? Like a certain day or a time when you are most proud to be a member of that team, and not about hitting goals or exceeding the forecast or anything like that. Like maybe you'll have some of those and they'll be awesome. But a lot of the stories that make us most proud to work where we work are about how we show up for each other. And so hearing those stories reflect a belief that your group holds about humanity in general, not just about the people who buy your stuff. And that's really like what's most inspiring about it.
And so you split time then between doing this for an organization but do you also work with just individuals who are trying to figure this out for themselves?
Yeah, I literally just got back. We did a 2-day workshop in London this past week, where now we're working largely on, it's the same process, but we've added an extension on now for helping people get clear on their hows. And so day 1's really diving into your why. What's the overarching driver, right? Like that North Star for you that can be your decision-making filter of, this is me at my best, Will taking on this new project, hiring this new person, being in a relationship with this person, whatever it might be, the choice that you're about to make, will that put you in a better spot to be your best self? And then you have the words for that. So that's what day 1's really focused on. And then day 2 is more around taking those themes that maybe didn't make it into that why statement, but are just as important in your life, and turning those into a list of actionable habits that you can live on a day-to-day basis that put you in a really good position to live that, right? And so like on a day-to-day basis, the way I show up will enable me to better, hopefully, will enable me to better live my why and connect with people and inspire them. So that's what we spend most of day 2 on.
And that is your why. Can you say that again? Like what is your why statement?
My personal why is to catalyze growth in people so that we have the tools to build a better world. And so, yeah, and you have an awesome why, and I want you to share that in a second, because when you told me, it blew me away, and I actually shared it with someone in the workshop a couple of days ago. But for me, it really reflects the clarity that I had around not just, I love teaching, I love coaching, seeing someone else grow really keeps me at my best. And I also get a lot from when people help me grow. But my favorite part of that process, and the part that brings me the most joy, is like dropping that knowledge bomb, giving someone the aha moment, and then letting them take it forward. So that's like, for me, the catalyst piece of that. And then the last part, the impact piece, really reflects a strong held belief, and this showed up in my stories of, at the end of the day, I really truly believe that if everyone has the mental toolbox, emotional toolbox, to better function as human beings with each other, we get through so many more of our problems, right? Like obviously resources and finances is a huge piece of that and a huge influence, but I think the ability to step back and have an actual dialogue is huge. So that drives a lot of what I do. Why I do what I do is trying to get people those tools so that we can better work together for a brighter future. So now I want you to share your why statement, because it's so awesome. I love it.
Sure. Yeah. So my why statement is to help others beat gravity so they can be free to do what they're born to do. And
I love it.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, how do you know when you've got it right? Because I didn't start with that one. That was like the fifth or sixth iteration. But I'm curious, in your words, how do you know that you have your why right?
Yeah, great question. So it's right when it inspires you most, and it's never done. So that's the other key component, is like you and I are super inspired by how ours are right now. And as long as that essence stays intact, you'll always be iterating and finding new words that maybe even resonate and bring a deeper level of understanding and attachment to your why. And so I think I started out coming out of my first why discovery. I had something along the lines of like to inspire people so that they feel confident moving through the world, or something along those lines. Like the essence was pretty similar. I wasn't inspired by the language. It felt pretty generic coming out of it. And it wasn't until I had like conversations, I kept it top of mind. And I just happened to be walking by, I remember this, when I was living in Las Vegas. They have a startup there called Catalyst Creative. And I walked by and saw a sign for this startup, and I was like, that's the word, like catalyst. That's what's been missing. And that just gave me that moment of clarity. And so each person on our team, I think, has been through at least 3 or 4 iterations to try and like find those words that really resonate with them. And like our chief rebel officer, but the longstanding CEO of Start With Why, just recently updated the language of hers. And she's been in love with the language that she's had for quite a while now. And just taking a little bit of a different angle on it and a different focus can sometimes make you connect more deeply at a different point in your life, as long as that essence stays intact.
Does it change? Do people's whys evolve, or is it mostly set in stone and you're just trying to uncover it and it's there somewhere, but you've got to dig it up?
So I'll tell you our stance on it, which is your why is your why no matter where you are. And it doesn't change. Once it's set, it doesn't change. Meaning that like once you've had enough life experience, which for some people could be really young, like, 15, 16, if you've had a lot of those life event type of challenge your perspective kind of moments, growth moments packed into that many years of life, maybe you've already discovered it. Maybe someone who's been a little bit more in a bubble or something like that goes to college and it's not till 21, 22. Somewhere usually in that range though is when at that point you've kind of formed your beliefs about the world. Not saying if like it's not in contrast with a growth mindset. It's saying your core, what makes you feel the best, is probably pretty ingrained at that point. And your depth of relationship with that, though, will change and shift. And so the idea is, and that's why the language is always shifting, is because you yourself are grappling with, do I actually understand this about myself the whole time? And so we always say, like, as long as the essence stays the same, the words will hopefully continue to morph, because that means that you're still continuing to put time and energy into really thinking about it and grasping it. And in fact, Simon himself just tweaked his why, I think definitely within the past 6 months. And he just changed one word. And so I think he said he had the words "the world" in it, and he just changed "the" to "our" to make it more personal and to make it like connect deeper with him and his impact piece of the statement. So it's really about less about finding the exact words for an exact occasion, which I think a lot of people get confused about. They think I have a work why, I have a home why. You got one why. Our stance is you got one why. If you've got multiple whys, somewhere you're lying. And so what you want to do is get that clarity, because it'll look different, right, in different situations. So the example that I give, obviously, workshops, keynotes, that kind of thing helps me catalyze growth in people. That's easy correlation in the work life. I am an uncle. I have 2 nephews and a niece, all under 8 years old. And in my personal life, one of the things I love most and what I get the most fulfillment out of is watching, being able to play the role of the growth guy for my nieces and nephews. So we're all from this small town in Colorado, not a hugely diverse area in terms of perspectives. And so I've been able to kind of bring some of that back from living in the different places that I've lived. And one morning I had a conversation with my nephew, and I was wearing an old t-shirt that it was from a company picnic where it had luau flowers on it. And he asked me why I was wearing a girl's shirt. And I said, well, why? What do you mean? I'm not wearing a girl's shirt. Why do you say that? And he said, well, it's got pink on it. And I just said, well, why would a color have a gender? And his little mind just like started to slowly explode right in front of me. And I was like, yes, excellent. Like, I just love being able to do that. So like, it looks totally different in the way it plays out, but like that essence is still in the background. I get a ton of fulfillment from bringing that role or playing that role across the board.
Well, and I think that's, to me, what's so cool about this is it really is almost like the grand unified field theory of you. Like it has all these weird ways that it manifests, but you can reduce it to this one thing that is just like, when you get your why, like, or at least the way that I knew I had mine right, is I got goosebumps when it came out of my mouth. I'm like, whoa, yeah, that's it. That's the one.
What was it that got you the right words? What brought you to the iteration you have now?
So I was tinkering with this concept of escape velocity and like gravity. And like, I've always been very much drawn towards helping other entrepreneurs and helping people that are like stuck in jobs they don't like and help them figure out, well, what else could you do? And so to me, like beating gravity is this idea of like gravity manifests in different ways, like the mortgage that keeps you from going on remote year, or the, commitments that really aren't, like, you could figure out if you just sat down and like unraveled them, they're not a huge deal, but you like build up this story in your head and it's just gravity that like locks you up. And so I love the idea of like unlocking people, helping them beat gravity, and liberating them to go do what they were meant to do.
That's beautiful. I love that. And the other thing too that comes to mind is, you mentioned like kind of the unified, clear, like summary, I guess, right? The boiled down thing. And so the other thing that's cool is, I talked a little bit about like how and what as like things that we instinctively know, or we spend more time and energy on. So we have this thing called the golden circle, which includes 3 levels: why, how, and what. And a lot of people think that like, if it's important to me, it has to be in my why. And so when we do these workshops and everything, people try and cram as much as possible into like, this is me in a sentence, right? And so they think that's their why. And I think a lot of companies fall into that trap as well when they're starting to like put their purpose or vision or mission or whatever it is out there. They're like, well, we have to include these kinds of words because we like love this idea. But really the cool thing about this is that, like, to your point, it's this clarified, it's just one thing. Like your whole golden circle is, there's no level, like what you do is just as important as why you do it. And the same thing with your hows. However, like the why is the filter, right? And so like having that clear, this is the contribution I make and the impact that it has when I am at my absolute best, and it gives me a ton of fulfillment. Like that, having that in just like one small form is super handy when you're going through life. And I just love that.
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now by Ray Dalio. It's called Principles. And it reminds me a lot. There's another one, Charlie Munger wrote a book called Seeking Wisdom. And it's like this idea of like these heuristics that can be used in any situation. Once you have like this set of heuristics, and to me, the why is like all that boiled down to a single thing for you, where it's like this lens where, does it pass that filter? I should go do that. Does it not? Like, I shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. No, I love that.
I think one of the interesting things with, like peanut butter and chocolate here, remote year and start with why. Like I little history. I actually tried early on to get start with why to partner up and actually bake it into the program of remote year. And I think that's actually, we realized we had some emails where we were both on the same thread months ago.
Yeah.
Do you think this could be rendered in that scenario, like a 12-month city doing a little bit each month to help people unearth their why on remote year? Is that something you think could work?
Absolutely. It's interesting, right? Because right now we have it designed as like a 1 or a 2 day process, which is tough. Like for any facilitator, boiling down life experience into a small 30 to 40 minute window of storytelling is like, you can't realistically expect people to be able to step into that and just like nail it on try one, right? And it's an iterative process, like we said. So setting the expectation early of like, here's how you get there, and then like maybe revisits or check-ins or something like that over the course of the 12 months, I think is totally something that is in line with what we believe and what I think remote year largely is about. Because a lot of, in the conversations that I've had with remote year and the people that are behind the scenes organizing like track events and stuff like that, it's a lot about like, they recognize people here. There's several reasons people come on remote year, right? And a large portion of people come on to kind of figure things out in one way or another. Could be, career-wise, could be personally, could just be to try something new, but they're looking for something. And I think this gives them a great compass to go through those different interactions and different encounters to say like, there's a ton of FOMO because you've got events everywhere. You've got a ton of things you can go out and do on the weekends. And this gives you an option to move forward and say, will this make me the best version of myself or not? And then you have less little fear of missing out on everything because you're like, that's going to be fun. But like this other thing that I'm going to be doing instead is totally up my alley. And I'm going to get a ton more fulfillment that's going to be longer lasting from this other piece that I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. So it's almost like it could craft your entire remote year experience for you if you figure out your why and you get that right, and then it kind of informs your decisions about what you do on remote year, and it even optimizes the whole experience.
Totally. And that's the thing I tell people about finding your why, really defining your golden circle in general, is not as much about this. When we talk about purpose and we talk about, your cause or your belief, a lot of times people get a little like, oh, that's a little too touchy feely or a little fuzzy, or we're not going on some remote mountaintop and communing with each other for a week or anything like that. Like it really, it kind of scares some people off. But what I tell people is like, going through this exercise and coming out with a why, clear why and hows helps you be more intentional about how you live life, right? So it's not about like, I can only do these things. There's no police that are holding you to it, right? It's just like a lot of these things are mindless to an extent that we do on a day-to-day basis. We kind of go through cruise control, or to your point, gravity guides us in certain directions that we go. And we don't put a lot of intentional thought into why we do things beyond that seems fun. This will move me ahead in either my career or whatever, or I'm good at this thing, or I can get more money, right? Those are the big buckets that kind of like guide us on a daily basis. And this puts a really simplified lens on like, now you can make an informed decision of like, okay, I know I'm going to do this thing that's fun and isn't going to be getting me anywhere, but at least I know that I'm not going to be looking for that missing piece in this thing over here, because I know it's not going to be there. Doesn't mean I can't do it, but I can just be more intentional about the things that I do.
Yeah, I love that idea of living more intentionally or deliberately. Yeah, interesting. What are like the most, or do you guys, when you do a session with people, do you then ever do like a retrospective or get back and see what the results were? Like what are some astounding results that you've seen, or if you're able to share?
Yeah. Well, one pops in my mind because it's fairly recent. So we've only been doing open enrollment workshops, meaning like holding ones where individuals could come. Usually we work with businesses that bring us in to do it for a small group. So we've only been doing these open enrollment workshops for about a year and a half, if you include the betas. And so one of our early on workshop attendees in New York, he was super engaged the whole time. And when he was going through the workshop, he was kind of in a transition period, wasn't sure what he was doing. He was looking for something to push him forward in a specific direction, but he just didn't know which direction to go. And he hadn't graduated high school. He had to kind of like take a different alternate route through life, and then ended up like coming back, getting his GED. And then he was doing an online college at the time he came through the workshop. And so he wrote back to me on LinkedIn, because we'd been touching base. We do some like kind of, there's Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups that we create with the people afterwards, and we stay in touch on that. And soon we're going to have a community, which will be awesome. But he wrote me on LinkedIn, and one of the other guys that has also stayed in really high touch along his journey, and said, I just wanted you all to know how big of an impact you made on my life. This year, I'm entering the C-suite at my company, and graduated, got my degree, and like finished with like his why statement at the end, and says, can't wait to keep doing this for many more people for many years to come. And it was just like, that's what you hope for when you're doing these things. So that's probably the biggest example I've seen. And for him, it was all about just this intentional piece and making it about other people. And so you don't have to be this philanthropic giving individual. I don't consider myself to be someone who like goes out of his way to be super charitable, but recognizing that so much of life is how you impact the people around you. And I think like he had that realization along the way and just didn't have words for what it was that he was doing for other people in a meaningful way. And so once he had that, he was able to bring that back to his family, his work, and clearly it paid off with the relationships that now got him to where he's at.
Yeah, it's super interesting, just the power of words when you think about it, and like clarity. And they say like writing forces clear thinking, because now you're having to like put it into words, and just that process really makes you think through stuff.
Exactly.
This is case in point. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. Not a lot of us put enough. I always tell people, like, even if you're not as interested in, I want my why, even just going through this process, to your point, has a ton of value for you, because if nothing else, you learn a lot about yourself, what makes you tick, what actually are the things that are meaningful to you that you've never really thought about before. And so if nothing else, it's just a really good learning experience for yourself.
I wish that more people, I mean, I wish that your why would have to be on your business card, because like how great immediately you can connect with someone and like know what they're about, and just like what a conversation starter, you know. I put mine on my blog along with some other stuff, but like to me, it's all about like creating this amazing surface area that allows someone else who doesn't know you, when they first meet you, like, oh my God, that's amazing. Tell me more about like beating gravity and what that means, you know?
Yeah, totally. And well, yours is amazing, and it's an amazing conversation starter because you've got beautiful language around it too. The other thing too that I talk about in this last group, there was a little hesitation because like we recommend like the first draft be in a certain format, which anyone who's watching this will probably notice that you and I both had a to blank so that blank kind of format. Because it's really good about making sure you're clear on your contribution and you're clear on the impact that that has. But sometimes people get a little worried because they're like, you know, if someone came up to me and asked, you know, they're not ready to put it on a business card yet, but they want to practice it a little bit. They're not sure that if they got asked, what do you do? They'd be comfortable saying like, well, you know, I catalyze growth in people so that they have the tools to build a better world. Like, so the thing I also throw out is once you're clear on your why, you are able to then contextually present it appropriately. Right. So like for me, I probably like on an airplane, and when someone asks me, what do I do for a living? I don't always say, well, I catalyze growth in people so that we have the tools to build a better world. What I say is I get to give people aha moments for a living. And that to me captures the essence of what it is that I do, and it infuses my why into it. And then if they want to have more of a conversation around that, then like, awesome, let's talk about it. If they're like, oh, so you're like a speaker, then I'm like, I know where that conversation is going as well. So there's like, you know, you have the freedom. Once you've got that clarity, you've got the freedom to really like say, what does this mean in this context? And that really opens up doors as well.
That's a perfect, I love that. Give people aha moments, because it's like that perfect elevator pitch that it intrigues, and it's like you said, it's going to go a different direction based on what their experience is. So it's like, yeah, we'll just see where you take this and I'll run with that.
Yeah. And sometimes people are like, oh, he's weird. And that's okay. Because like to your point,
self-selects. Yeah. Those are the people you don't know.
Exactly. We weren't going to have a great conversation probably for the next hour and a half anyway. So like, it's totally great that you put on your headphones and then I can work on my slide deck. So it's totally fine.
Nice. Is there anyone for whom this does not work? Like, what's the hit rate when you do one of these sessions and some people get it? And then where does this fall down? Or is there anyone who can't do this?
So I wouldn't say there's no one who can't do it. I will tell you who struggles the most in this format, right? Because I think sometimes it's a format thing. Are people who, one, are voluntold to be there. So if you didn't opt in, if maybe your team wants to do it as like a way of learning more about each other and more about yourselves, and someone's just like constantly like, I could be doing work right now, thinking about a million other things, you're not going to be present for the other people who need you to be present for them to get to their why. So I think people who have been voluntold typically aren't quite as open to the process, which is the barrier itself. The second thing I would say is it's tough for perfectionists and overthinkers. So I'm an overthinker, which is why I felt a little uninspired with my why coming out of my first one, because I didn't have the perfect words, and I want that. I needed that to be plaque ready, put it on a wall. And so those people tend to struggle a little more, just if for no other reason than like, you're not going to be there on day one or day two even. You might get 75, 85% of the way there. If you get 90% there, you've beaten out most of us, including the people on our team for day one. So a lot of times people get in their own way when it comes to, because they start overthinking the words rather than focusing on what's the essence of it and can I get clear on the essence of it. And so those are the two groups I see with the biggest like stumbling blocks as you go through.
Yeah. Here's a thought. Is there any impetus within your team to try and get this into schools? Because like I would love to see this baked in at a high school, if not earlier level. Like what are you guys thinking in that regard?
Yeah. So the issue really is scalability for us, and because we'd love to go to schools. And so right now, most of our igniters, what we usually do is if there's a school in our area that's asked for it, we're just like, yeah, like let's do a why discovery for your students, or at least a why conversation. So basically, sitting down, giving them a little bit of the framework. Here's how we do it. Having a general conversation where they can have a quick convo with someone else, maybe tell a quick story, pull out some themes for each other, get the experience of it, and we can get some common themes, and then they can take it forward. So that's one option we have, but those all involve people, right? Our team has to physically be there. And so the idea that we've been kind of toying around is like, how can we get tools in the hands of teachers and administrators that are really like interested in this? And the opportunity that we've kind of seen most apparent is the counselors. So when you have someone who's getting ready to go to college, this is an amazing tool to have. And having them, like giving them the tools to, even if it's the online course that you took, right, giving them the access to that is a huge thing. Preparing them to have that conversation is a huge thing. And in college, that's another group we want to work with. But it kind of goes back to scalability, because a lot of times colleges will want someone physically there, and to bring someone physically from our team takes a lot of like logistics and costs and stuff like that. And so it just doesn't become feasible, especially on the scale of as many as we want. So we're working on digital toolkit at the moment to try and hopefully reach as many of those as possible.
Yeah, it seems like just giving the online course, or at a very steeply discounted rate, at least for educational institutions, would be an awesome start.
Yeah, we have also, if you've obviously read the books, but for anybody who's watching this, read, Leaders Eat Last and Start With Why. Simon has a real deep respect and affinity for the armed forces. And so getting this in the hands of veterans as well is something that's really, when you come back from war, having a why could be a super huge tool to help you reacclimate to what you're walking back into, and ultimately find where you fit in that environment, right? So that's another group we're trying to work with, as well as like armed forces, as well as police is another group we're trying to work with on that stuff too.
Nice. What about, okay, so finding the why is like the cornerstone. Can you talk at all about the how discoveries? Like how do you actuate? Is there any like framework or deterministic process for kind of helping people figure out how to actually implement their why?
Yeah, so excellent question. So when you do a why discovery and you've gone through your stories and you've gone through, anywhere between 3 and 8 impactful stories that really mean a lot to you, and you've got a partner, you got maybe an observer, maybe even a second observer in there, like helping to pull themes, writing down notes, giving you that feedback, you've got a pretty dense list of themes that have popped out. Some of them are huge, and those, like the big ones, show up in your why statement. But the remaining ones, like, obviously are still important, and those need a place to show up in your golden circle. And some of them will naturally show up in your what level, because they're very specific, they're very tactical. But a lot of them are around like the way you present yourself. So for instance, like optimism might have been on your themes list, and that's like super important to you. And so the idea is, you can't wake up in optimism. It's not a thing that's physically possible. And what you want to do, there's too many companies right now leave values in principle format, meaning people don't know what it looks like, because that's so up to interpretation. So integrity could be a value that a company has, but what does integrity actually look like? Well, in different situations, in different scenarios, people can interpret that differently. And what you don't want is everyone in your company interpreting one value differently, because then there's no consistency across the board. So the same is true. The fix for that also helps as an individual when you're going through your personal hows, which is we use those themes that we came out from our why that maybe weren't there but are still important to us, to then turn into action statements. And so using the example of optimism, what does it look like when you do that thing? Well, I look for the positive. So look for the positive would be the action statement there for the how, because when you're at your natural best, you look for the positive in any situation. And so we usually recommend get a top 5 list to start with. Doesn't mean you don't have more than 5 hows. Everyone's got way more than 5 hows probably. But it's kind of like you don't want to move cities, start a diet, and get a workout routine started all on the same day, because it's just like, it's too much. You will absolutely drop the ball. So if you start with 5, it's bite-sized, it's manageable. But the idea is you build up this list of 5 habits, and the structure is, how I recommend it to people is like, if someone was struggling in this area, how would you coach them up? So if you're a leader at work and someone was struggling being optimistic, you say, okay, well, we just need you to look for the positive here, right? Or like, silver line it, or whatever that version is for you. And so find those words that hold meaning for you, that are in an action statement, because as an individual, they're there to remind you, 1, to do that thing, and 2, to communicate that to the people around you. Because what most people don't really think about is, your why allows you to identify your tribe, but that doesn't mean you're going to get along with everyone in your tribe just because you believe the same thing and you're passionate about the same thing. And so really relationship is impacted by how you show up in interactions on a day-to-day basis. And so your hows allow you to then articulate those. Once you've got a clear set of hows, you can go to your team, you can go to your spouse, you can go to whoever that you're very close with and say, hey, 1, I need you to hold me accountable to these things because I'm not my best self all the time. And if I'm not doing these things, remind me, hey, you need to be doing these things. But also, by articulating that to them, they can now understand the best way to approach you around certain things, or how you can best show up in a relationship, right? So if like optimism is one of my strengths, like they can come to you knowing like if you've got a big problem, or if they've got a big problem they need help with, you might be able to be like, okay, well, what about this thing over here that's going right? So it helps strengthen those relationships.
Nice. Cool. All right. Just a few more questions here. Let me see what I got for you.
Do you like the recording studio it looks like I'm in?
I do. Well, normally I'm in where you are.
I know. I saw that on the
like switch roles right now.
I feel like I'm about to drop the hottest album of 2017 right here.
Okay, so what's like the lowest barrier entry way for someone who's listening who wants to engage here and go down this path? Is it reading the book, or, I mean, I know the online course is like goes for like $150, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, either 150 or 130. I can't remember, but probably lowest barrier. There's a book out called Find Your Why. And in Find Your Why, it outlines our whole process. So, and that's like, on Amazon between $8 and $15, I think, depending on, or Kindle, I don't know. And so it's low cost, and it outlines how do we do an entire like individual why discovery workshop. And the same thing for if you want to do it for your team or company, it's like the whole process is outlined there. And you can then take that to, like, if you decide you want to do it, you can give that book to the people who are going to be asking you the questions and walking you through stories. They can read it to get the context. So I'd say that's probably a good start. As far as materials, like if you wanted to just get the ball rolling at like your company or with someone else, we do have like a free or downloadable slide deck that people have used as in presentations, or like portions of it in PowerPoint or PDF format. I think they're both available. And it's like a name your price, so you can totally download it for free. You could download for however much you want. So that's startwithwhy.com/tools. And there's a bunch of stuff under there. So yeah, and a lot of it's name your own price kind of stuff. So
cool. All right, I'll link to that in the show notes. Something I just thought of. So tell me your take on this. This is a weird thought I had the other day. I was reading a piece in the New York Times that was called "Lost Einsteins." And this phenomenon, in the context they were talking about it was basically saying that like this idea, it's like there's X number of people in the population that could have been the next Einstein had they only been put in the right environment growing up. And so this was in the context of like socioeconomic status and underprivileged kids. And it's like super unfortunate that like all these people that have the potential to be like the next Einstein or Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, the plant wasn't in the sunlight, so it just never gets the chance to bloom, right? But it got me thinking, and the way that I see things, and coincidentally, like what I think is the magic of remote year and this idea of going nomadic and all these programs that help people kind of like change it up, is that I think that same phenomenon occurs in adults as well. I think that we get kind of corralled down a path in life sometimes, and instead of just like stopping and taking a step back and switching, that people can just stay in that for too long. And I think something like, start with why is one tool to me that helps you like have that lens to see things differently. Remote year for me also had that same effect of like jarring me and forcibly putting me in different uncomfortable situations, and it kind of unlocked me in the same way. I don't know, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and it's one I just want to call out, totally makes sense considering your why, that you would hold that belief, which is fantastic. But on the other side of that, I 100% agree. I think for me, the having a clear vision of why, and having it simple and clear, right, to where it actually applies both at work and at home. Like when we take what's out of our why, it actually opens up the aperture a little bit, to your point, where we're not so laser focused on like, these are my only options. Because when we kind of get corralled down that path, we start thinking about terms in our life in terms of what we see in front of us. And we're like, it has to look this way because of X, Y, and Z. But when we kind of peel away some of those what's, and we just really focus on like, what matters about this? Like, how can I best show up here? What's the contribution I'm making at a high level? Not just like, I'm a really great mentor at work, but saying like, I help people grow. That's like, you open it up to where it's like, oh, it doesn't have to look like that thing. And that's a big thing that we say at the end, where people are like, what does this look like when I take it back to work, home, or whatever, is find small ways to start. And I think that like that exercise of finding a small way to get your why, to bring your why to life, forces you to look at something from a different lens, go into a situation and seek out, oh, how could I, somewhere I wouldn't have thought of doing it before, bring my why here. And I think that that to me is like one of the best parts, is it like opens your eyes up beyond just like what I've been thinking these past however long, and going down that path.
Well, just think about the implications for like the education, to go back to that. Like, absolutely, if you think about like, you're always just looking at what's in front of you. And like, when I look at my own path, and it's just like, oh crap, I got to pick a major. I guess I'll pick psychology. And oh crap, I've now got to get a job. I guess I'll go do this thing that I got the major for. And it's just like, you literally get like just funneled based on like maybe some silly choice that you made like early on. And it's just a string of things that lead to one another. But that's why I love this notion of, if you can open the aperture, like you're saying, and step back and take the why, and from that emerges all these ways that it can manifest. That's like, I don't know, to me, it's so clear they need to be using this tool in schools. This is like the best thing you could do at a career fair for kids, would be to like get them start thinking this way.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when people ask what kind of company we are, we actually classify ourselves as an education company, not as like a consulting company or anything like that, because that's what we're hoping to do. So it's a good note for us to actually focus even more on that, because we're all about spreading it. That's why we're not super private about the method, right? We wrote a book to say this is exactly what we do when we do a workshop, so that people who couldn't afford it could just go do it. And so it's a good reminder, though, that like I was talking to a company recently that I super admire, and we were just having a conversation because I happened to know the guys, and he just casually dropped, oh yeah, like this line of business, we hope that we want to have like their primary income stream. He said, we hope to be making, like our goal is we're figuring out how to make this free by 2050. And he's like, so we got to constantly be working on our revenue streams in different areas, but like our major goal is that like no one ever has to pay for this thing because it's so important. And it was just like so profound to me. And that's why I hope that like a ton of us like start heading that direction, because I think that's the way to like really get it into education, because education can't afford it, right? Especially in the US. So I love that.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I will thank you for taking the time. Any parting thoughts? I will link to the book and the tools and the downloadable template and the course. But any last thoughts for anyone listening who's thinking about doing this?
No major last thoughts or anything like that. Just thank you so much for having me. Always love talking about this stuff. If anyone watching has specific questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to Sean. You can also, I'm Matt at startwithwhy.com. So it's pretty easy to reach me. I don't mind getting the emails. I might take a while to respond, but I will certainly email you back because I always love talking about this stuff.
Well, I've actually just recently made it so people can ask video questions on the podcast. So this isn't published yet. We're recording this. Obviously, it'll be published at some point, but hopefully we'll make those available, and people may even ask some video questions.
I would love that. Yeah, I want to see you. So do that.
All right, Matt, thanks so much. Have an awesome time in Lisbon.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, that was my conversation with Matt. If you have a question for Matt, you can leave a written comment underneath his episode on nomadpodcast.com. You can also now record a video question using your webcam. Same thing just underneath his episode. Matt is currently on Remote Year. If you're considering doing a travel program like Remote Year, you can get up to $300 off just by applying via our discounts page. You can find that link in the footer of our website, or you can just go to nomadpodcast.com/discounts. Now note, if you apply directly to the travel program, it does nullify your eligibility for this discount. So if you're seeking the discount, be sure to apply through our link first. Nomad Podcast is supported in part by Nomad Prep, an online academy for aspiring digital nomads to help you put your preparation efforts on rails. You can get access to the first 4 days of this 2-week course completely free by going to nomadprep.com/podcast. Nomad Prep, take your job on the road and take on the world. I would love to know what topics you want to see covered on future episodes. So if you have an opinion on this, please send an email to admin@nomadpodcast.com and let me know what you would like to hear about. So coming down the pipeline, we do have 2 interesting guests coming up. Joey Karam is a friend of mine. He's one of the foremost authorities on self-defense. He runs a school out of Newport Beach, California, teaching Krav Maga. He's also taught and certified most of the instructors in the Americas, so North, South, and Central America, and he's one of the foremost experts on Krav Maga. So we'll be talking with him about personal safety, situational awareness, avoidance, de-escalation, and the basics of what you should know, what anyone should know about self-defense. We're also going to be talking with my friend Luke Tierney, no relation, but he's the founder of something called Nomad Playground, and so he has essentially what is like a Yelp review site of remote work job listing sites. So he can help you find remote work more easily. But yeah, so I would love to know what else you want to see, what other topics you'd like to see covered, but those are our upcoming guests. And if you would like to be the first to know when the next episode comes out, go to nomadpodcast.com, and in the footer, you can put in your email address, and I will send you an email when I publish the next episode. So that's it for now. Until next time, it's a big world out there. Get out there and explore it. I will see you on the road.
Nomad. Nomad. Nomad.